Chapter 8 of The Black Star, a school story for boys by Andrew H. Walpole. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 8. Fane's Fatal Mistake. Strange as it may seem, the coolest person who looked on the appalling scene in the classroom presided over by the French master was Jack Simmons himself. Recovering from his surprise, he could gaze down and enjoy the havoc even as he knew that, unless something intervened to save them, he and his companions were booked for a severe spasm of trouble, and trouble of the direst order. But the classroom scene was irresistibly funny, too funny for words. Monsieur Anastasie stood like a sawdust statue, his comical mustache powdered with sawdust, too amazed, too dumbfounded, to utter a word of protest or surprise. Before him the sawdust was spread in an irregular layer, almost knee-deep, and it was piled on tables and chairs, and the boys of the extra French set, in generous fashion. All at once the French master found his voice with a vengeance. "What is the meaning of this?" he cried, dusting at his coat and sending the sawdust flying in clouds. "Bah, I am smothered, I am choked. Abominable!" He raved and danced on the platform, scooping the sawdust in handfuls from his person, and then shaking indignant fists at the open manhole. "Best, I will not have the tomfool antic. Ah, but you shall answer for him before quickly." He choked. "Sacre bleu! It is an outrage. It is what you call indignation. The ear of the headmaster shall be appraised of this." The extra French set, half guessing what had happened, commenced to roar with laughter at those who had received the contents of the bags upon their heads, and the furious Anastasie became more wild and incoherent than ever. "Ah, you laugh," he cried. "You identify me comical, but you shall not entertain the ribald laughter for longer. Remember the proverb, 'He laughs loudest who gathers no moss.'" There was a perfect yell at this brilliant effort on the part of Monsieur Anastasie, who was always tangling his proverbs in the most ludicrous manner. But the laughter was cut short when Jack Simmons began to appear in installments through the open manhole. His feet showed first, then his legs dangled. In a moment he was hanging by his hands, then he let go and came to the floor as lightly as a feather. "I must explain," he commenced, but Monsieur Anastasie literally overwhelmed him with a torrent of French and English phrases, and he could not get a word in on any account. "Ah, you are the misdemeanor," said the excitable Frenchman bitingly. "You play at Père Santa Claus, hein? Explain yourself without the hesitate. You shall disport yourself before the headmaster. Quoi?" "I'm really sorry for what happened," said Jack, seeking to cool the master's wrath by appearing calm himself. "It was all an accident." "Ah, an accident!" "Yes, that's so. The sawdust has tipped himself over." "I don't mean that. You see, sir, we were going to play a joke on these cads. I mean these fellows next door. We did not mean to harm you in any way. Only thing was, though, we mistook the giddy, that is, the manhole up there. The two of them are close together, and in the dark we opened the wrong one." He stood awaiting the verdict of Monsieur Anastasie, who took the frank confession in silence. Then he dusted a little sawdust off his sleeve. "I rejoice myself you have owned up, Simmons. The business was very foolish, and you are too big to intermeddle yourself with the foolish tricks of little boys. I was going to inform the headmaster of your prank, entendez-vous? But no, you are not a bad boy. You must disperse the sawdust." And the hot-tempered little French master actually smiled. It was his way. He flew into a furious rage in a second or two, but it never lasted long. And in this case Jack's open confession had somewhat subtly pleased him. He turned to his class. "It is wise, is it not," he observed, "to be certain always? Think what our friend would have saved had he the forethought to look into the room. Remember the proverb, 'A look before you leap saves nine.'" Ha, ha, ha! The class chuckled its appreciation of this portmanteaued proverb, while Jack and others of the Crees who had nothing to do hastily collected the sawdust and shamefacedly put it into sacks that they had emptied with such gusto. Monsieur Anastasie, deep in the mysteries of French grammar, permitted himself an occasional broad smile. Quite restored to his native good humor, just as Jack was about to leave the room, however, the French master walked over to him and spoke quietly. 200 lines, he said, will repair the mistake. From Corneille, Le Cid, and put in all the accents. He smiled and nodded, as if he had just handed Jack a 5-pound note, and Jack got out into the corridor, feeling that he had made a fool of himself. "Jingo, though!" he exclaimed. "I was jolly lucky not to be carpeted before the head. What a dickens of a mess I would have landed myself into!" "Hullo, Patchy! How fares it, comrade?" asked Patch, in his usual grand manner, saluting Jack with an elaborate salaam. "What is this rumor that comes to my ears, that you have met with a setback in the course of that jape intended for the cripples? Untrue, of course. No such luck. We made an awful bloomer, and we'll have it in for those cripple blighters worse than ever now. Instead of letting the cripples have the sawdust, we made a slight miscalculation, and tipped it all over old Annie and his class." "Annie, I take it, is Monsieur Anastasie? I suppose he was sore." "Oh, he cut up a bit at first, but he soon cooled down. In fact, he was rather decent about it. Handed me 200 lines, that's all." "Bad luck, comrade, but it might have been worse, mightn't it?" "Oh, easily. I might have dropped on Annie's head and killed him, or perhaps the sawdust might have choked one of those grinning beggars in the extra French set, or there might have been a tribe of death adders hidden in the sawdust. Oh, yes, I came off pretty well, considering." He laughed his usual happy, careless laugh. "Why, I've gone and forgotten that trial swim for this afternoon, down at the baths. Coming along?" No, thanks. In fact, comrade, I may confide that I can't swim." "Oh, get out. You must. On a hot afternoon like this, too. Come along. I'll give you a few pointers about the game. What on earth would you do if you were left on a sinking ship with no life belts and unable to swim?" Pat seemed to ponder the situation. "I expect I should sink," he announced brightly. "Come, I'll tell you what I'll do," said Jack. "I'll defy an indignant world, and teach you the noble art of supporting yourself in the aqueous element. That is, after the trial swim." "What is this trial swim, comrade? For that matter, any sort of a swim would be a trial, for me." "Joke?" asked Jack, carelessly. "Fact is, old fellow, this is a preliminary canter, so to speak, for 100 yards championship of the cow. Friend Billy is in for the event, and he's a hot favorite, too. You'll see. It's a pound to a peanut that the cup goes to Salmon's house this year. I'm just going to give Billy a bit of a sprint over the length." "I'm sure it will be most exciting, comrade. I never did like baths, though. The sight of all that water. Ugh! Tell you what, I've just remembered that I'd made an appointment. Beastly forgetful of me, but—" "No, you don't," laughed Jack, grabbing the socialist's arm and dragging him toward the entrance to the baths. "You must learn swimming sometime. Why not now? Hop into a costume. Wait till my swim's over." In a few minutes Patch stood shivering upon the edge in a costume several sizes too large for him, while Jack took a 10-second start on Billy in a 100-yard sprint. Septimus looked on with an eye of cold disfavor as the two chums swept the length of the baths in a cloud of foam and bubbles. Billy had perfected a very neat trudge and crawl, and he beat Jack, who was no mean hand at the game, by a matter of 3 seconds, despite the start that the latter had had. Later on, when Billy ran off to change, Jack caught sight of the miserable Septimus Patch, and recalled his intention of giving the inventor a few lessons. "Here," said Jack, "come along to the shallow end. Look slippy." Septimus paced gingerly after him along the wet boards, and all at once he executed a most astounding maneuver. His feet went out from under him, and he landed head-first in the water. "Good gracious, what's the beggar up to?" asked Jack, who had imagined that Patch had dived into the deeper part of the bath. "I say," he went on, as Patch's head appeared, "you can swim after all." "Swim? Glug!" said Patch, as a wavelet curved into his conveniently open mouth. "No! Help! I'm drowning! Glug!" He paddled his way frantically to a ladder near by and hauled himself out. "You asked me to look slippy. "And I slipped," he said. "Believe me, it's no joke. How far did the water fall when I swallowed that little lot? Ugh! I had a young Niagara trickling down my throat. Comrade, does it all taste like that?" Jack choked with laughter. "Mind your step," he warned. "Here, this is the shallow end. Hop in. It's only up to your waist." He prepared to demonstrate the art of kicking while holding to a step on the level of the water, and Septimus appeared to manage that part of the business well enough. Jack then showed his study mate a few simple arm movements, and invited Septimus to try while being supported in the water by his middle. After a few minutes of this sport, Patch wriggled out of his mentor's grasp and spluttered indignantly. "Do you want me to drown?" he asked. "I'll buy a gun and let you shoot me. It'd be quicker." "Why, what's up?" "Up, do you say? Down more fits it. At least that's where my head was, under water, while you were watching my feet. I don't want to die a lingering death, thanks. I've had enough for the first lesson, and I'd like to take the others by post." As he clambered out of the bath, his loose costume hanging about him in ridiculous folds, a roar of laughter went up from the fellows bathing there. When they got back to the study, they met Billy Faraday, who was grinning broadly. "I hear you've been teaching the inventor how to swim," he laughed. "I believe he found the water quite wet?" "Yes, comrade," answered Patch genially, "and so would you, if only you were more familiar with that unknown quantity." "Well, you ought to," began Billy, but he broke off with a sharp, "I say, what's the matter? The coat, it's gone, and the stars in it, too." Jack and Septimus looked up in surprise, and were startled to observe that it was even as Billy had said. The coat was gone. They jumped up and made a hurried search. "Jingo, this is serious," murmured Jack. "It's gone, right enough. Wonder whether that beast Rettisham—" "It's got misplaced, perhaps," said Patch, who had put down his book and joined in the hunt. "Mislaid somewhere or other." "But I never wear it," said Billy. "How could it?" Fane's the solution, I think," jerked out of the amateur detective, rubbing his chin hard. "We didn't tell him, I remember, that we'd hidden the star, and perhaps but here he is." "Yes, here I am," said Fane, closing the door. "You fellows look excited. What's up?" "Look here, did you move a coat of Billy's? It was hanging up in the corner." "Billy's coat!" exclaimed Fane, turning a trifle pale. "What's the matter with Billy's coat?" "Matter enough, comrade," said Patch grimly. "We didn't tell you. We forgot, as a matter of fact. We didn't tell you that we'd sewn the black star up in one of the seams of that coat to hide it, and now the coat's gone." "My only aunt," gasped Fane, falling into a chair. "Is that right? Was the star in that coat?" "Yes. Why?" "Why?" echoed Fane. "I sold that coat for 5 bob to an Indian hawker yesterday afternoon, and I expect he's miles off by this time." End of chapter 8.